listen, today, entrepreneurship isn't really that sexy. So I got this topic in my head and I just couldn't get it out of my head. And I'm thought, how can I work this into a lesson in leadership? I really feel that my two things are leadership and entrepreneurship. Those are a couple of ships right there, right? So I think I said here, the subtitle of this conversation is entrepreneurship isn't really that sexy, because we're going to really kind of focus on what is entrepreneurship and what does that mean and what has this world made it into. So such a sort of glam thing with these like Facebook guys and Steve Jobs and all these entrepreneurial success stories that have really kind of taken over the world. I mean, literally have taken over the world. And this word entrepreneurship resonates with a lot of people and what you're going to be and how you're going to do it. And so I would uncategorically never deny that I am an entrepreneur. And so I think that Wired Differently and the whole concept of Wired Differently does revolve around entrepreneurial people, entrepreneurship. And so I want to talk about that, but I also want to make sure that people understand what entrepreneurship is. I think they should know what other choices they have out there when it comes to picking a career in leadership. And I'm kind of boiling this all into the 3 ships of leadership. So I'm going to just click this here. So the 3 ships of leadership, it's kind of funny when you think about it. So leadership, we know what leadership is: to lead, to take charge, and to be responsible for your actions and others' actions and the success or demise of whatever task that you are there for success. Success is accomplishing something that you set forth to do. Success doesn't have to be to make $1 million. We've been over that. We understand that successionaires is the goal of my leadership model. Whenever I talk to my employees, where they are in whatever state all over the country, I mean, the goal isn't really for them to be extremely profitable in the ROI of the product, or for me to be always extremely profitable in the ROI of the product. It's this idea of successfully completing a task. If you successfully complete a task over and over and over again, you'll become what we call a successionaire. And a successionaire is the first step to being whatever you want to call a millionaire, a billionaire, whatever that is. But I want to talk to you about the 3 ships of leadership. So today's kind of part 1 of 2 parts that I want to go with, because I know that I like to keep these shows a little shorter, but I want to really, really dig in a little bit, because I know that some things confuse me. And if I'm confused, then the people that are in my organizations are probably going to be confused. And so I've always had a rule of being openly and awkwardly honest when I don't understand things. And I think I've even been made fun of for asking ridiculous questions. But, I think we need to be clear that everybody has a different level of understanding of all things in this world. And I think it's fair that if you're going to be a leader, involved with a leader, that you should be open and honest about your bandwidth, because expectations are the only way to key and have wonderful success in relationships. So expectations must be set. Knowledge must be known to set expectations. So I really want you guys to understand that. So here we go. Leadership, the 3 ships of leadership. So leadership is kind of really what we talk about all the time in an overriding theme when it comes to Wired Differently. And the subtle side of Wired Differently, though, and I shouldn't say so subtle, if you read the book, it talks about all types of different leadership that I went through in my life to grow my organizations, to build my organizations, not only my organizations, but my family, and the successes I had in that, and obviously the failures I had in that. We spent a lot of time on those. But I think it's very important to know that the book is about perseverance, which is a key quality in leadership, right? And owning who you really are. Right? So the ticker right there at the bottom, if you can see it, leadership requires clear understanding of who you are in any circumstance. Now, we've spent a lot of time on personalities over the last week with the DISC format and trying to understand why Trump may have won or lost. And we talked about last week, I think, ego, empathy, balance, and that's leadership understanding of your proportion of ego with your proportion of empathy. And I made this crazy claim last week that I had a big ego. I know, right? Well, the point is that my ego is only matched by my empathy. I mean, if you have a big ego, a big drive, a big confidence in yourself and a goal or a task in leadership, then to balance that ego, you need to have big empathy, right? So I would charge myself with large empathy because I have a larger ego when it comes to leadership. But the 3 ships of leadership I want to break down this week and then talk about how sexy entrepreneurship is, because we're going to focus in on, I think, be honest with you, I don't want to say entrepreneurship is overrated. I just think that it's glamorized. It's all here of late in the last decade. This entrepreneurship of, got to start our own business, and we've got to invent something. We've got to get out on the social media, and we've got to get in the .com world. And if we're not creating something, we're not keeping up with the Joneses and how they are. And I think that it's important that you all understand entrepreneurship, businessship, and employeeship. So if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to take charge in your life, in your family, in your world, in your business, and all the things that are going on, I think that as a leader, you have to really find your lane. And here's the 3 ships that leadership generally focuses on. So I want to talk to you first and foremost about entrepreneurship. Okay. So entrepreneurship. Here we go. Now, this is the definition I came up with for entrepreneurship. Now, I took it from the dictionary, but I made it a little clearer for everyone to understand. Entrepreneurship, because I think it's very important. My good friend Dave and I, we had a conversation over this probably 5 years ago. We literally had a fisticuff on a radio show over business person versus entrepreneurship leadership. But let's just talk about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a leader or person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative, meaning it takes a lot to get it going, and risk. Lots of initiative and lots of risk. That's an entrepreneur. Generally, that means they're starting something new, right? They're creating something that hasn't really been created before. I did another talk regarding this, and there was 2 types of businesses. There's this monolistic business front, and then there's this perfectly competitive business front. So an entrepreneur is trying to find this monopolistic business front, creating something that really hasn't been created, or dialing in a different way that no one else has really done it, creating a new LLC, a new brand, a new something wired differently, right? I mean, that's really why the book and me and the show exists, is because I coined myself, or I brand myself as this leader in being wired differently, right? So I think that's, if you're following me, you're either attracted to the idea that you're annoyed by it, or you're attracted to the idea that you may fit into that bucket. Either way, you're watching it for one reason or another. And that's what this entrepreneurship leadership possibility is for you. So one of the 3 leadership ships is a entrepreneurship, a leader, a person who organizes and manages our enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. That means it really hasn't been done this way before, or it has been done and it failed, and you're going back in and you're doing a startup or a start over or a recreation or something that kind of the world really hasn't seen. Like, for instance, Tom's Donuts is an entrepreneurial task for me. Well, why is that? Because it's been around 50 years, right, Todd? Well, the reason I'm wearing the shirt today is because I want you to understand that, yeah, that's an entrepreneurial task for me. It wasn't something I jumped into because I wanted to do it. It was something because it had kind of taken some tough times, and I don't want to say foundered, but it just really wasn't where it needed to be after all the time. And some of the leadership was getting tired and moving forward. And so when we looked at it, my wife and I, we said, hey, we can let this go on the way it is and not honor what the business really should look like, or we can go in and do something fresh and different with it, right? Creating an entrepreneurial role for us, which is really exciting to me, right? An entrepreneur takes risk. Payserve Systems was a risk. No one was really doing it the way we were doing it when I came out of the PEO in the 90s, and we kind of put it in a different way. Now, the Service Bureau was there, but the way we were doing it was different. and we took the risk. We put our money in it. We put our ideas in it. We put our blood, sweat, and tears in it. We did those things entrepreneurially minded, knowing big risk, big reward, big risk, big reward. No one to blame but Todd, right? Entrepreneurial, take that risk, right? That's this idea of entrepreneurship. So the next one I want to talk to you about is, sometimes I can't see these tickers, and I don't know that we're going to have to talk to them about that. There's the 3. The next one is businessship, entrepreneurship, employeeship. Oh, man. I tell you what, I got a whole show planned. And businessship is the second one. And I'm going to talk to you about businessship. So I got to write down here, and sometimes they stick and sometimes they don't. Okay, so businessship. This is really important. So one is entrepreneurship, which is really a word. And then we have businessship, which is not a word. Just invented it. But it's this idea of going into business. So entrepreneurial, usually with considerable initiative and risk, right? Businessship, a leader or person who has an occupation, profession, or trade engaged in commerce, a profit-seeking enterprise or concern, usually with considerable managed and mitigated risk, all right? So the difference between a business ship and an entrepreneurial ship is the mitigated risk component. So generally, if you're going to go into business and you're not going to be an entrepreneur, you're actually going to go do maybe a startup. You could buy a franchise, right? An entrepreneur really isn't someone who's going to go out and buy a franchise. It doesn't mean one's better than the other, but a franchise means that, hey, I got a couple 100,000 or whatever I have set back, and I want to take a risk in business, but I want to take a mitigated risk. I want to take a risk that's been proven. I just want to manage a business that's type that's been proven. I don't want to take all the risk and time to invent Apple or to invent Microsoft or to invent Salesforce.com. That's not what I want to do. I want to go and buy a McDonald's franchise. I want to go buy maybe a Taco Bell. I want to go maybe buy a Tom's Donuts franchise, right? A Tom's Donuts franchise because it's already been set up. It's been proven. It's been around for 50 years. And guess what? That would be a mitigated risk, but you would still be a business person. So we're calling that business ship. So that is the second ship, right? The second ship. So right here, we got 1 is entrepreneurship, 2 is business ship, and the third one is employeeship. And this is really where the crux of the show kind of came to me. It was kind of like entrepreneurship isn't sexy. Certainly isn't all the time. It's like we get confused with the glam side of things, and maybe you're going to hit it big and you're going to be a billionaire and you're going to go public and you get all these stockholders and you're going to get famous. And, I'll be honest with you, I like the idea of being recognized as an entrepreneur. I like the idea of having a show. I like the idea of being recognized as someone that you could trust in this leadership world of Wired Differently, or being an entrepreneur, because I'm clearly an entrepreneur. Now, an entrepreneur takes that risk, and a lot of times we'll call it 0 to 1. Peter Thiel wrote a book called 0 to 1. And Peter Thiel was a co-founder with Elon Musk in PayPal, right? And he wrote this book called 0 to 1. So an entrepreneur is actually the person that takes something from 0 to 1 to a startup. And then this business ship person is the person that takes it from 1 to 100 and manages and runs the business. Make sense? So Steve Jobs was an entrepreneur. He took Apple from 0, an idea, to 1 to get it running. And then Tim Cook, clearly a business operating genius, has taken it from 1 to 100 to make it a successful moving operation long term. But the last person, the third ship of the leadership is this employee ship. And it's another word that I made up. But I think it's important that you understand that we have these 3 types of leadership venues to be a leader in. that takes risk, little risk, and less risk. And you need to figure out which type of leader you want to be and which type of venue for you to flourish, right? So employeeship, here we go. I wrote this down. So I took the definition of employee and I figured out the ship and what that piece would be. So a leader or person who works for another person or business or firm for pay, usually with considerable steady benefits and a pay and little worry or financial or personal risk. That makes sense? So it takes leadership to be in a business, to be an employee. But in that employee role, you have less financial risk, if any at all. You have less personal risk, if much at all, depending what you're in. But if you're going to grow as an employee and look for upward mobility, then you're going to have to be a strong leader, growing in your department and growing in those ways, right? So they're all equally important. You see, a business can't work without all three: an entrepreneur, a business person, and an employmentship. So you got entrepreneurship, businessmanship, and then you've got employeeship. You need all three. And so when you're a leader and you're a budding leader, like I've spoke with a lot of college students and high school students, and I mean, I think just leadership in this role of being a business person, you really need to understand which one of these ships your personality appetite really would fall for. Where do you feel? And so I'm just going to really basically talk about this stuff today. And then next Sunday, we're going to dive into this whole idea. Entrepreneurship really isn't that sexy. And so I'm really going to pull back on being an entrepreneur. And I'm going to really pull back on the covers and say, okay, here's what really sucks about being an entrepreneur. Because I don't think it's responsible of me to not share what being a pure entrepreneurial can do to your family, can do to your own mind, can do to other people, can do to your own survival. I mean, we only have so much time in this life, right? And we only have so many earning years. We basically, from the age of 22 to really 40 years old, you have got to figure out what lane you're going to be in and how you're going to have your retirement and your packages and your exit strategy figured out. Because I know from my perspective, by the time I was 40, if I wasn't a strong leader, no one was going to hire me. They were bringing in these younger, smarter tech people, right? The dot-com boom happened, and I was kind of left out behind that. And I caught the end of it and learned enough to know that a leader needs to know. And I needed to build something faster and faster and faster, or I was going to have to go back into the workplace. And if I went into the workplace, which is a place I never was really successful in, then I would be of lower wage. I would have been not as desirable in many regards because I was 40 something and I had been building an entrepreneurial footprint for the last 20 some years of my life. And so I really want people, and we're going to talk about that next Sunday, about this not sexy side of entrepreneurship. And I'm not going to talk you out of it. I just want you to understand that, man, entrepreneurship just isn't sexy all the time, right? And I think that the people in the media and the world really wants to label that entrepreneurship as a desirable and a place that's a higher ground. And it's just not. It's just not. Businessmanship is just as important as entrepreneurship. And it requires less risk. It requires a little more certainty in some and many regards. And then the most important piece, obviously, I think, is employeeship. Employeeship, and we've talked about that, but employeeship is this idea that we've already passed on, that a person works for another person that's a leader inside of a company, and they have considerably more benefits, considerably more money, and considerably less worry and risk. And those are the people that are driving in the backbone behind any successful entrepreneur or business person. So that's kind of what I want to talk about with you today. We went 22 minutes, which is hard to believe. We're already right there, and I'm trying to get this show under 20 minutes. So listen, let's just recap, because we're going to really dive into this next Sunday. We got The leadership ticker is leadership requires clear understanding of who you are in any circumstance. So any circumstance you're a leader, any circumstance you need to clearly understand what your role is, who you are, the amount of risk you have, the amount of risk you want to take, and how you're going to affect other people. And we want to realize this, that there are three types of leaderships, right? There's three types of leaderships. So here we go. The three types of leaderships are 1, entrepreneurship, and 2, businessship, and 3, employeeship. Well, listen, I got to be honest with you. The battery on this computer is dying, and I want to get this out to you. It's been a crazy Sunday morning today, getting everything around, everything that's going on in our life. But I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to end this with understanding that, you know what, leadership requires clear understanding of who you are in any circumstances, and entrepreneurship isn't really that sexy. Well, thanks for listening today, and we're going to jump on next week, and we're going to do this thing. Entrepreneurship part 2. Entrepreneurship is just really not that sexy. I think I'm probably cutting out. So, hey, you guys all have a great Sunday, and I'll charge my battery up better next week. Have a great day. Bye.